The night was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life. Sophia had waited 9 long months, enduring the pain, the sleepless nights, and the endless worries that came with carrying 3 little lives inside her. She was weak, exhausted, yet hopeful. Tonight was the night she was finally going to meet her children. But instead of holding her hand, whispering words of comfort, and standing by her side like a loving husband should, David was nowhere to be found. Sophia gripped the edge of the bed, her face pale as waves of pain shot through her body. The contractions came harder and closer, her breathing turned shallow, and she reached desperately for her phone. She needed him. She needed her husband, the man she had trusted with her heart, her life, and now the lives of their unborn children. She dialed his number with trembling hands, tears clouding her eyes. "David, it's time," she whispered through her tears. "I can't do this alone. Please hurry." But what she didn't know was that David was holding another phone to his ear, not hers. Across town, in a luxurious apartment glowing with golden lights, Clara, his secret lover, purred into the receiver. Her voice was sweet, tempting, and poisonous all at once. "David, I need you tonight. Forget everything else. Just be with me." Her words slid like silk into his ears. And in that moment, David made the cruelest choice a husband could ever make. He looked at his wedding band, hesitated for a heartbeat, and then slipped it into his pocket as though it meant nothing. He stood, buttoned his shirt, and with one last glance at the phone Sophia had just called from, he turned his back on his wife and their unborn children. Sophia's cries echoed in the silence of their small home. Alone, clutching her stomach, she tried to breathe through the pain. She whispered his name again and again, as if repeating it could somehow bring him back. But no one answered, no one came. Outside, the night grew colder. The world seemed merciless as Sophia's body shook with agony. She had given David everything, her youth, her trust, her love. And now, when she needed him the most, he abandoned her for another woman's embrace. The clock ticked past midnight. Sophia collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, her phone slipping from her hand. Her vision blurred, but through the haze of pain, one thought kept her alive. "I must protect my babies. Even if I'm alone, I will bring them into this world." And while Sophia fought for her life and the lives of her children, David was raising a glass of wine with Clara, laughing, as if he had no wife, no home, no responsibility. But fate was watching, and the price of betrayal was already on its way. The hospital hallway was a blur of white lights and rushing footsteps. Sophia's body trembled as 2 nurses wheeled her through the emergency doors. Her skin was drenched in sweat, her face pale, but her spirit clung desperately to life. The pain came in waves so fierce she thought her body might shatter. Yet through the agony, her mind clung to one thought: "I must stay alive for my babies." "Stay with us, ma'am," the nurse urged, gripping Sophia's hand firmly. "You're strong. You can do this. Just breathe." Sophia tried to focus, but her chest tightened with fear. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Where is my husband? He promised he would be here. He promised." The nurse exchanged a sorrowful glance with the doctor. No one knew where David was, and no one had time to ask. The priority was saving Sophia and her unborn children. The contractions tore through her like fire. Sophia bit down on her lip to stifle a scream, her body arching from the pain. She had imagined this moment so differently. In her dreams, David would hold her hand, kiss her forehead, and whisper words of courage. Instead, she felt nothing but emptiness. The bed beside her was cold, and the silence of his absence was louder than any scream. The doctor, a tall man with calm but serious eyes, leaned over. "Sophia, you're strong, but we need to move quickly. Your babies are coming sooner than expected, and their lives depend on you holding on. Do you understand?" Her head nodded weakly. "Please, save them," she pleaded. "I don't care about me. Just save them." Those words pierced the doctor's heart. He had seen many mothers give birth, but rarely one so selfless, so willing to sacrifice everything. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We'll fight for all of you." Inside the delivery room, the atmosphere was tense. Machines beeped rapidly, nurses called out instructions, and sweat glistened on Sophia's forehead. She closed her eyes, imagining her children's tiny faces, clinging to the hope that they would live. "Push, Sophia, push!" the doctor commanded. Her screams echoed down the hallway, raw and filled with both agony and determination. She pushed with every ounce of strength she had left, her nails digging into the sheets, her heart pounding like a war drum. Minutes felt like hours. The air was thick with urgency. Then suddenly the first cry pierced the room, a fragile, beautiful sound. A baby boy. Tears flooded Sophia's eyes, but she had no time to rest. Another contraction came, fiercer than the last. She bore down again, her body trembling violently. Another cry filled the air. A baby girl, her vision blurred, her chest heaving, but she knew there was one more life inside her. She whispered hoarsely, "Please. Please let my last baby survive." The room grew quiet, the tension suffocating. The doctor worked feverishly, sweat dripping from his brow. Sophia's grip loosened as exhaustion overtook her. The nurses' voices grew distant. And just as her eyes fluttered closed, the room fell silent. Was the third baby alive, or had Sophia given her all in vain? Across town, in a lavish apartment decorated with gold accents and crystal chandeliers, Clara lounged on a velvet sofa. A glass of red wine swirled between her fingers as she admired her reflection in the tall mirror. She had everything she wanted: beauty, charm, and now the attention of a married man who was too weak to resist her. Her phone lit up, and she smirked. David had just texted her, "On my way." She leaned back, satisfied. For Clara, tonight wasn't about love, it was about power. She wanted to make sure David's loyalty belonged to her and her alone, even if it meant destroying the life of his wife and unborn children. When David arrived, slightly flushed from rushing, Clara rose gracefully and slipped her arms around his neck. The scent of expensive perfume filled the air. "You're here," she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. "I thought for a moment you'd actually go running to that wife of yours." David's jaw tightened, guilt flickering across his eyes for just a second. "Sophia will be fine. She always is. She's strong." Clara pulled back, tilting her head with a sly smile. "Strong? She's nothing without you. Don't you see? I'm the one who understands you, the one who can give you the life you deserve." Her words were like poison wrapped in honey. David wanted to argue, but instead, he let himself sink deeper into her embrace. With each kiss, each whispered promise, he drowned out the memory of Sophia struggling alone at home. The night unfolded with laughter, music, and luxury. Clara poured more wine, feeding David sweet lies about the future they could build together. She spoke of traveling the world, of owning businesses, of leaving the past behind. "You don't need the weight of responsibility dragging you down," Clara cooed. "Imagine a life with me, where it's just us, free, untouchable." David closed his eyes, choosing to believe her. He convinced himself Sophia would understand, that she would forgive him, that tonight's choice was harmless. But deep down, he knew he was betraying not just his wife, but the 3 innocent lives about to enter the world without a father by their side. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sophia's cries of pain echoed down sterile halls. Each scream could have shattered David's heart if he had been there to hear it. But he wasn't. He was clinking glasses with Clara, ignoring the phone that buzzed in his pocket. Sophia's number flashed again and again on his screen, but David silenced it without a second thought. Clara noticed and laughed lightly, pressing her lips against his cheek. "Let her cry," Clara murmured. "Tonight, you're mine." The words sealed his choice. David slipped further into the trap, blinded by desire, deaf to duty. He had no idea that with every ignored call, every careless laugh, he was carving the path toward his own downfall. But just as David lost himself in Clara's arms, a knock at the door shattered the illusion. Who could possibly be looking for him at this hour? The knock on the apartment door startled David. He froze, the glass of wine halfway to his lips. Clara arched an eyebrow, her lips curling into a playful smile. "Are you expecting someone?" she teased, brushing her fingers along his arm. David shook his head quickly. "No, nobody knows I'm here." His voice carried a nervous edge. The knock came again, louder this time. Reluctantly, David stood and opened the door. A delivery boy handed him a small envelope and hurried off into the night. Confused, David tore it open. Inside was a simple note written in hurried handwriting. "Your wife is in labor. She needs you. Come now." David's hands trembled. His heart raced as guilt surged through him. Sophia was giving birth. His wife, his children, his family. For a brief moment, he imagined rushing to the hospital, holding her hand, and finally doing what was right. But Clara noticed the conflict in his eyes. She glided over, snatched the note from his hand, and read it aloud with mocking laughter. Labor? Oh, poor little Sophia, crying all alone. David, don't you see? This is exactly why you shouldn't go. She'll survive without you. She always does. But me? Clara's voice softened into a seductive whisper. I won't forgive you if you leave me tonight. Her words slithered into his heart, suffocating the faint spark of conscience. Clara pressed closer, her perfume enveloping him, her eyes demanding his loyalty. David's pulse quickened, not with love, but with fear of losing the woman who had ensnared him. She'll understand, he muttered weakly, convincing himself of a lie. Sophia's strong. She'll be fine. Clara smiled triumphantly and led him back inside, shutting the door on the outside world. With that one decision, David turned his back on the woman who had given him everything. At that very moment, across town, Sophia's body writhed in unbearable pain. Her screams filled the delivery room, her hands clawing at the sheets as she begged for strength. She glanced toward the empty space where her husband should have been, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. David? Please, I need you, she whispered through sobs. But her plea was swallowed by the sterile silence. The doctor barked orders, the nurses worked frantically, but none of them could replace the warmth of the man who had promised to stand beside her forever. Sophia felt abandoned, discarded like she meant nothing. And still she fought, not for herself, but for the 3 tiny lives depending on her. Meanwhile, David raised his glass again, lost in Clara's charms. He convinced himself he had made the right choice, that he deserved this freedom, this luxury. He silenced the last pangs of guilt with another swallow of wine, sealing his betrayal. But destiny has a way of recording every cruelty. Every tear Sophia shed, every scream of pain he ignored, was etching his punishment into the future. And just as Sophia's final push came, her body shaking violently, a sudden complication threatened to take everything away. Would she survive, or would David's betrayal cost him more than he'd ever imagined? While David drowned himself in Clara's sweet lies, life and death wrestled with Sophia inside the hospital room. Her cries pierced the sterile walls, her breath shallow, her strength slipping away. Every second felt like eternity. Every contraction a battle between survival and surrender. In the chaos of that night, a familiar face appeared. Mrs. Green, Sophia's elderly neighbor. She had lived next door for decades, a widow with silver hair and kind eyes. She had watched Sophia grow from a young bride into a devoted wife, and she had noticed the loneliness that lingered in Sophia's gaze long before anyone else cared to see it. When she heard that Sophia had gone into labor, Mrs. Green did not hesitate. She hurried to the hospital, clutching her worn shawl around her shoulders, her heart pounding with worry. As she stepped into the waiting area, she saw Sophia's phone lying on the counter. Screen cracked, messages unanswered. David's name was nowhere to be found. "Where's her husband?" Mrs. Green asked a nurse breathlessly. The nurse's eyes dropped to the floor. He isn't here." Mrs. Green's heart sank. Anger and sorrow mingled in her chest. She whispered under her breath, "How could he leave her now? That selfish man." Without wasting another second, she pushed into the delivery room. There lay Sophia, drenched in sweat, her body trembling, her hands desperately reaching out for someone, anyone, to hold. "Mrs. Green?" Sophia gasped weakly, tears blurring her vision. I can't do this alone." The older woman rushed to her side, gripping her hand tightly. "You're not alone, sweetheart. I'm here. I won't let you go through this without someone who loves you." Sophia's tears spilled freely. That touch, that simple reassurance, was the anchor she needed to keep fighting. The doctor gave Mrs. Green a quick nod, recognizing that her presence might be the very thing keeping Sophia from giving up. "Push, Sophia, push," the doctor urged again. Sophia screamed, her body arching in agony. Mrs. Green whispered in her ear, "For your baby's child. Do it for them. They need you. You're stronger than you think." And with that, Sophia gathered every last drop of strength. Another cry filled the room. The second baby, alive but frail, was placed gently into the nurse's arms. Mrs. Green's hand never left hers. She wiped Sophia's tears with the corner of her shawl, whispering prayers under her breath. "Stay with me, Sophia. Don't you dare give up now." The third baby was still fighting to be born. The doctor's face tightened with worry. The room grew tense again. Sophia's chest rose and fell unevenly, exhaustion stealing her breath. Mrs. Green leaned closer, her voice steady and fierce. "Listen to me, Sophia. Your children will grow up strong, but only if you're here to raise them. Hold on, don't let David's betrayal be the end of you. Sophia's eyes fluttered, her lips trembling. She drew in one more ragged breath, summoning courage. And just as the doctor prepared for the final push, a sudden alarm from the monitor blared. Something was terribly wrong with Sophia's heart. The piercing sound of the heart monitor filled the room, turning every breath into terror. Nurses scrambled, voices overlapping in panic. Her heart rate is dropping. We're losing her. Sophia's vision blurred as the world around her spun into chaos. The ceiling lights above seemed to flicker, distant and cold. Her chest burned, each breath shallow, like air was slipping away no matter how desperately she tried to hold on. Mrs. Green tightened her grip on Sophia's hand. "Stay with us, child. Don't you dare close those eyes." Her voice trembled, but her determination was unshakable. The doctor barked orders. "Get me more oxygen, now. We have to stabilize her before we lose both mother and child." Sophia felt her body weaken, her strength draining faster than she could fight. In her haze, she saw flickering images, David smiling on their wedding day, the vows he had whispered, the promises he had broken. And then she saw the faces of her babies, tiny and fragile, waiting for her. "No," she whispered faintly, "I can't leave them, not now." The doctor leaned close, urgency in his voice. "Sophia, listen to me. One last push, one more. Your child's life depends on it, and so does yours." Sophia's body trembled violently. Her pulse slowed, her lips turned pale. The machines beeped frantically, marking the edge of life and death. Mrs. Green's eyes welled with tears, but she leaned in close, her voice steady. "Think of your babies, Sophia. Think of their little hands, their little cries. They need their mother. You're all they have." The words pierced through the fog of pain. Sophia gritted her teeth, gathering every last fragment of strength buried deep within her soul. With a cry that shook the room, she pushed, pouring her life into that one final effort. A silence fell. The air grew still, every pair of eyes locked on the doctor. Then a fragile cry broke through the silence. The third baby was alive. Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks, her body collapsing against the bed in sheer exhaustion. The doctor handed the newborn to the nurse, relief washing over his face. "We've got all three. They're premature but alive." Mrs. Green sobbed quietly, whispering, "You did it, child, you did it." She brushed Sophia's damp hair back, pride shining in her eyes. But the victory was fragile. Sophia's body went limp, her eyes closing despite her struggle to stay awake. The monitor screamed again, louder, sharper. Her blood pressure plummeted. "Her heart's failing," a nurse shouted. "We're losing her again." The doctor immediately moved into action. "Prepare for emergency intervention. We cannot let her slip away." Sophia's mind drifted in and out of consciousness. She saw shadows, heard muffled voices, felt the tug of hands working to save her. In her fading thoughts, she prayed, "Please, God, let me live long enough to see them grow. Don't let them be motherless." Mrs. Green pressed her forehead against Sophia's hand, whispering broken prayers. "Don't leave them, Sophia. Don't leave us. Fight." The room buzzed with urgency, nurses moving in a blur, the doctor's voice sharp and commanding. And just as the team prepared for a drastic measure to restart her heart, the monitor flatlined. The line went still. The shrill, continuous beep of the flatline filled the room like a death sentence. For a moment, everyone froze, the weight of despair pressing down. But then Dr. James, the attending physician, snapped into action. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Chest compressions. Now, don't you give up on me, Sophia. Not tonight." A nurse jumped into position, pumping rhythmically on Sophia's chest, while another prepared the crash cart. The smell of antiseptic mixed with fear as every second dragged like an eternity. Mrs. Green clutched her shawl with trembling hands, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. She whispered prayers under her breath, begging heaven not to take Sophia away. Dr. James grabbed the paddles of the defibrillator. His jaw was set, his eyes burning with determination. "Charge to 200. Clear." A jolt of electricity surged through Sophia's fragile body, lifting her slightly off the bed. The monitor flickered, then returned to silence. Again, James barked. "Charge to 300. Clear." Another shock. Sophia's body convulsed. Still nothing. Mrs. Green cried out, "Don't stop! Please, don't let her die!" Dr. James looked at Sophia's pale face, her lips drained of color, her body limp. For a brief second, even he felt the crushing weight of failure. But then he remembered the newborns, their tiny cries echoing faintly in the background. 3 innocent lives had just entered the world. They needed their mother. "Come on, Sophia," he muttered fiercely, sweat dripping from his brow. "Your children are waiting. Don't you dare leave them now." He positioned the paddles again. Charge to 360. Clear. A third shock rippled through her body. The monitor stuttered, the line trembled, then suddenly a faint beep broke the silence. One beep, then another. Her heart was beating again. Relief flooded the room. Nurses sighed. Some even whispered thank yous to God. Mrs. Green collapsed into a chair, her tears now tears of joy. "She's back," the nurse announced, her voice shaky with relief. Dr. James didn't allow himself to celebrate yet. "Stabilize her, keep the oxygen steady, we're not out of danger." Sophia's eyelids fluttered weakly. Her breaths were shallow, but life had returned. She whispered something, her voice faint, almost lost beneath the machines. Mrs. Green leaned closer, clutching her hand. "What is it, child? Are they alive?" Sophia's cracked lips barely formed the words. Mrs. Green smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, all 3. They're alive. They're waiting for you." A weak smile curved Sophia's lips, but exhaustion dragged her back under. Her body surrendered to unconsciousness, trusting the hands around her to keep her safe. Dr. James straightened, his expression both proud and grim. He had pulled her back from the brink, but he knew the battle was far from over. Premature babies meant long nights ahead, and Sophia's body was still fragile. The fight for survival had only just begun. As Sophia lay unconscious, her babies whisked to intensive care, James looked toward Mrs. Green. His voice was low, resolute. "She survived tonight, but she'll need more than medicine. She'll need people who truly stand by her, because her husband clearly won't." And as those words left his mouth, David's shadow loomed larger, completely unaware that the choice he had made tonight would soon destroy the life he thought he controlled. While Sophia lay unconscious, her fragile body clinging to life and her newborns fighting in incubators, David's night unfolded in a completely different world. Across town, in Clara's lavish apartment, the air buzzed with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. David sat comfortably on the velvet couch, a glass of champagne in his hand, Clara curled against him like a queen beside her king. The lights from the city skyline glittered through the tall windows, reflecting a life of luxury that David convinced himself he deserved. "To us," Clara toasted, raising her glass. "To a future where nothing and no one can stand in our way." David smirked, clinking his glass against hers. "To us," he repeated, his voice thick with alcohol and desire. As the night wore on, Clara leaned closer, her voice dripping with seduction. "David, you've spent too many years weighed down by responsibility. A weak wife, children you never asked for. You're better than that. With me, you'll finally be free." Her words stroked his ego, drowning the faint whispers of guilt that tried to creep in. David laughed, throwing his head back. "You're right. Sophia will manage. She always does. She's stronger than she looks." Clara smiled knowingly, though her eyes gleamed with calculation. She wasn't in love with David. She was in love with what he could give her: money, status, security. Every word she spoke was carefully chosen to keep him hooked, blind to the truth. Meanwhile, Sophia's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with the hospital's number, desperate calls for David to come. He glanced at it, frowning, but Clara quickly snatched the phone and pressed ignore. "Don't ruin tonight with her drama," she whispered, pressing her lips against his. "This is our time." David hesitated for a second, but then he let the phone go dark. He leaned back, convincing himself it was the right choice. After all, wasn't Clara right? Hadn't he earned this freedom? Music swelled in the background. Clara danced in the center of the room, her red dress swirling as she pulled David to his feet. They twirled, laughed, and kissed as though nothing else in the world existed. But beneath all the glamour, a shadow loomed. Every ignored call, every sip of champagne, every stolen kiss was a nail in the coffin of his marriage. While he celebrated with Clara, his wife nearly died, bringing his children into the world. And though he didn't know it yet, the price of his betrayal was already circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Clara pressed herself against him, her smile wicked. "David, forget the past. Sophia is nothing but a chain. You and I, we're unstoppable." David closed his eyes, surrendering to her words, unaware of how fragile his world truly was. But just as the night reached its peak, Clara's phone rang, and the name flashing on the screen was one that could unravel everything. Clara's phone buzzed loudly on the table, breaking the spell of music and laughter. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It wasn't a friend or a business contact. It was the hospital. "Strange," she muttered, her red lips curling slightly. "Why would they call me?" David stiffened, his hand tightening around his glass. He knew immediately what it meant. His chest grew heavy, guilt seeping in like smoke filling a room. "Sophia," he whispered under his breath. Clara caught it and rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you're going soft on me now." David reached for the phone, but Clara snatched it back, silencing the call with a swipe of her manicured finger. "Listen to me," she said firmly, pressing her body against his. "You run to her, and everything we've built tonight collapses. Do you really want to go back to being her prisoner?" David hesitated. His mind replayed the moment they first married. Sophia's shy smile, her trembling hands holding his as she whispered her vows. For a fleeting second, he felt the sting of shame. His children were being born at this very moment, and he was sitting here, drunk and careless. Clara saw the hesitation and tightened her grip on his arm. "David, wake up. That woman will drain you with responsibility. Crying babies, sleepless nights, endless demands. You'll drown. But with me, you'll rise. You'll have the life you always dreamed of." Her words were sharp, cutting away at the fragile thread of conscience left inside him. David looked at the dark screen of Clara's phone. The call had ended. The chance to do the right thing slipped away with it. "Another glass?" Clara purred, pouring more champagne. David swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, you're right. Sophia will manage." He raised his glass once more, trying to drown his guilt in bubbles and lies. Clara kissed his cheek, victorious, her eyes gleaming like a predator who had claimed her prey. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, chaos still reigned. Sophia lay unconscious, her body weak but alive, her babies fighting in their tiny incubators. Nurses moved quickly, adjusting wires and tubes, while Dr. James monitored their fragile breathing. "She needs him," Mrs. Green whispered, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. "She needs her husband to walk through that door." But the door remained closed. The man who should have been there was laughing in another woman's arms, sipping champagne, pretending his world was perfect. The night dragged on. Sophia's children cried softly, their tiny voices a chorus of survival. Mrs. Green sat at her bedside, whispering comfort that David never gave. Dr. James checked her vitals, silently vowing he wouldn't let her die. Not after all she had endured alone. And still, David ignored the truth. He convinced himself he had chosen wisely, that he was free. But fate has a way of knocking twice, and when the hospital reached out again, this time the news was something David could not ignore. The sun crept slowly through the hospital windows, painting the room with pale light. After a night that had nearly stolen her life, Sophia finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy and clouded, and for a moment she struggled to understand where she was. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled her nose, and the steady beeping of machines reminded her she was still alive. Her lips trembled as she whispered, My babies." Dr. James appeared at her bedside, his face soft but serious. "They're alive, Sophia. All three of them. They're small, fragile, but they're fighters, just like their mother." Tears blurred her vision. Relief washed over her, mingled with exhaustion and heartbreak. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Mrs. Green quickly leaned forward, supporting her gently. "You rest, sweetheart," the older woman said tenderly. "Your strength saved them. Now let us take care of you." Sophia's heart ached. "Where is David?" she asked, her voice cracking. Her eyes searched the room, desperate for the man she still hoped would appear. Mrs. Green hesitated, her face tightening. She didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that David had chosen another woman over his own family. Instead, she squeezed Sophia's hand. "He's not here right now, but you don't need him. You have us." The words cut deep. Not here. Not even for the birth of his own children. A sob caught in Sophia's throat, but she forced herself to stay strong. She would not let her babies see her broken. Moments later, the nurse rolled in 3 small incubators. The room grew still, almost sacred, as the fragile cries of the newborns filled the air. Sophia's tears spilled freely as the nurse carefully placed one of the tiny infants in her arms. Her body shook as she gazed down at the little face, so small, so perfect. "My son," she whispered, pressing her lips to his forehead. "You survived. You all survived." The second baby was brought to her next, then the third. Her arms trembled, but she pulled them close, cradling all three, as though she could shield them from the cruelty of the world. Mrs. Green wiped her own tears. "Look at them, child. They're your legacy. They're your reason to keep fighting." Sophia kissed each one, her heart overflowing with love and sorrow. She whispered promises through her tears. "I will never leave you. I will protect you, even if I must do it alone." Dr. James watched silently, his chest heavy with both admiration and pity. He had witnessed countless births, but none as tragic as this, a mother abandoned on the very night she gave life. Sophia looked toward the door one last time, hoping, praying David might walk in. But the doorway remained empty. Her tears fell onto her children's blankets as reality settled like stone in her chest. She was a wife in name only, a mother abandoned. And while she held her babies in lonely triumph, David was making a choice across town that would shatter her heart even more. Morning sunlight spilled into Clara's apartment, bouncing off the golden frames and marble floors. David sat slouched on the couch, nursing a headache from too much champagne. Clara, however, was wide awake, pacing the room with her phone in hand. She had answered one of the hospital's calls earlier, pretending to be concerned. Her voice had dripped with false sweetness as she asked, "Oh dear, how is Sophia? Is everything all right?" The nurse on the other end had explained that Sophia had survived a complicated birth and that the babies were alive but fragile. Clara had feigned relief, her lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. Now she turned to David, who rubbed his temples. "Good news," she said smoothly. "Sophia and the babies survived." David exhaled in relief, though guilt gnawed at him. "Thank God," I thought. Clara cut him off sharply. "Don't look so dramatic. You knew she would be fine. She's strong, remember?" He looked at her uneasily. "I should go see her. She needs me." Clara's laughter sliced through his words. "Needs you? David, don't be ridiculous. She's surrounded by doctors and nurses. What could you possibly add? Standing awkwardly by her bed while she cries? That's not what you want." David frowned, torn. "But they're my children." Clara moved closer, cupping his face in her hands. Her tone softened, her eyes glowing with practiced affection. "Listen to me. Those children will tie you down, drain you, make you miserable. Do you really want to spend your life trapped in that cycle? Or do you want to build a future with me? Power, freedom, everything you've ever wanted." Her words were sweet poison. David closed his eyes, letting her sway him. Clara kissed him softly, sealing the thought. But deep down, she was plotting. She knew that as long as Sophia and the babies existed, David's heart might waver, and Clara had no intention of sharing. Later that day, Clara insisted on accompanying David to the hospital, just to check. She dressed elegantly, her heels clicking on the sterile floors as if she owned the place. Nurses glanced at her curiously while Sophia lay pale and weak in her bed, cradling her children with Mrs. Green by her side. When Clara entered, she plastered on a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Sophia, darling, you poor thing, what an ordeal you've been through." Sophia's tired eyes flickered up. Her arms tightened around her babies instinctively. She sensed the falsehood dripping from every word. "Why are you here?" she asked hoarsely. Clara tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Because I care. I wanted to make sure you were all right." Mrs. Green narrowed her eyes, seeing straight through the act. But Sophia, too weak to argue, said nothing. Clara leaned closer to David, whispering just loud enough for Sophia to hear. "You can't let this drag you down. You have a life beyond this responsibility." Sophia's heart shattered, her tears falling silently as she realized Clara's real purpose. And in that moment, Sophia knew Clara wasn't here to comfort her. She was here to erase her. The hospital room was heavy with silence after Clara's cutting words. Sophia lay weak in bed, clutching her babies protectively. Her pale face was wet with tears, but her eyes burned with quiet defiance. She would not let Clara's poison take away the only joy she had left. David stood awkwardly between them, shifting uncomfortably. His gaze darted from his fragile wife to the woman who now had him under her spell. He opened his mouth, but Clara spoke first. "David," she said sweetly, her voice laced with hidden venom, "you need to be honest, with yourself and with her. Stop pretending you're the man she thinks you are. Sophia's voice cracked as she whispered, David, our children. They need their father. I need you. David swallowed hard. Guilt clawed at him, but Clara's hand slid into his, squeezing firmly. Tell her, Clara urged softly, yet firmly enough to remind him who controlled him now. David's shoulders slumped. He couldn't meet Sophia's eyes. I can't do this, Sophia. I'm not ready to be a father to 3 babies. This isn't the life I wanted. The words pierced Sophia's heart like a blade. She gasped, clutching her children tighter as if shielding them from their own father's rejection. Her voice shook. Not ready, David? You made vows. To me, to them. You're their father. But David only shook his head, looking more like a coward than a man. I'm sorry. I never asked for this. You're strong, Sophia. You'll manage on your own. Clara's lips curved into a victorious smile as she stroked his arm, pretending to console him. You're doing the right thing, David. Don't let guilt trap you. You deserve happiness, not chains. Mrs. Green, who had been silent until now, rose from her chair, her eyes blazing. Shame on you, David. This woman nearly died bringing your children into the world, and you stand here with another woman, denying your own flesh and blood? David flinched but said nothing. Clara stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mrs. Green, please, don't make this harder. We all know Sophia is strong enough to raise them without him. He'll only be in the way. Sophia's tears fell freely. Every word felt like salt in her wounds. Her body trembled, but she lifted her head, her voice breaking. If you walk away now, David, you're not just abandoning me, you're abandoning them. And one day, they'll know what you chose. For a flicker of a moment, doubt crossed David's face. But Clara's grip tightened, pulling him back into her orbit. Don't listen to her guilt, she whispered. Think about us, David. Think about the future you want. David turned away, unable to face his wife's broken gaze. His silence was louder than any words. Sophia buried her face into her baby's blankets, her sobs muffled but heartbreaking. Mrs. Green wrapped an arm around her, whispering, He'll pay for this, child. One day he'll pay. And as David walked out of the room, leaving Sophia behind, Clara's triumphant smile revealed her darkest intention, erasing Sophia completely from his life. Days passed in the hospital, each one blending into the next. Sophia grew a little stronger physically, but her heart remained shattered. She spent hours by her baby's incubators, whispering lullabies through her tears, promising them a future no matter how abandoned she felt. But Clara was not done. One afternoon, when the hallway was quiet and Mrs. Green had stepped away to bring Sophia some food, Clara entered the hospital room alone. She carried a bouquet of flowers, her heels clicking against the tile floor, her expression dripping with false concern. Sophia, Clara said smoothly, placing the flowers on the nightstand. How are you feeling, dear? Sophia stiffened, her eyes narrowing. Why are you here again? Clara gave a mock sigh, lowering herself into the chair beside the bed. Because I care. You've been through so much, I thought you might need a friend. The words twisted Sophia's stomach. A friend? She repeated bitterly. You stole my husband, and you dare to call yourself a friend? Clara tilted her head, her smile never wavering. I didn't steal anything. David came to me willingly. Maybe that should tell you something. Sophia's hands trembled as she clutched her baby's blankets tighter. Pain surged through her, but so did anger. You'll never replace me. No matter what lies you tell him, I am his wife, and these are his children. Clara leaned forward, her eyes sharp as glass. And what good has that done you? Look at you, lying weak in a hospital bed, raising 3 babies alone. David doesn't want this life. He doesn't want you. He wants freedom. He wants me. Sophia's throat tightened. Every word was a dagger, but she refused to let Clara see her break. If he truly wanted you, he wouldn't still wear his wedding ring. For the first time, Clara's mask slipped. Her smile faltered just slightly. Then she laughed softly, regaining her composure. Rings can be removed, vows can be broken. It's only a matter of time before he leaves you completely. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. I may be weak now, but my children will grow strong, and one day they'll see who stood by them and who walked away. Clara's expression hardened. You think you're noble, Sophia, but you're just pathetic. Do you really believe you can raise 3 children alone? You'll collapse under the weight, and when you do, David will already be mine. The air between them crackled with tension. Sophia's chest rose and fell rapidly, anger fueling her fragile strength. You may have his attention now, Clara, but hearts have a way of revealing truth. Lies don't last forever. Clara stood, adjusting her coat with elegance. She leaned closer, whispering in Sophia's ear. We'll see about that. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts, because soon I'll make sure you disappear completely. And as Clara swept out of the room, Sophia felt a chill crawl down her spine. Clara's words weren't just threats. They were a promise of war. Clara left the hospital that day with her mind buzzing like a hornet's nest. Sophia's defiance had struck a nerve, and Clara wasn't about to let it go. She knew David was weak, easy to manipulate, but as long as Sophia remained a presence in his life, there would always be a risk. Clara needed to cut Sophia out completely, not just from David's heart, but from his respect and reputation. Her plan was simple but cruel. Poison David against Sophia with lies. That evening, Clara poured 2 glasses of wine and sat beside David in his apartment. He looked tired, conflicted, as though the weight of what he had done lingered at the edge of his conscience. Clara slid closer, resting her head on his shoulder. You've been quiet all day, she purred. What's on your mind? David sighed heavily. I went to see the babies earlier. They're so small, Clara. And Sophia, she looks so fragile. I don't know if I did the right thing walking away. Clara's smile froze, but only for a moment. She quickly disguised it with a tender look. Oh, darling, I understand, but you need to know the truth about Sophia. David turned, frowning. What do you mean? Clara's voice dropped into a careful whisper, dripping with fabricated concern. She's been saying things about you, David. Hurtful things. The nurses told me she blames you for everything. She says you abandoned her, that you don't care if the babies live or die. She's turning everyone against you. David's eyes widened. She said that? Clara nodded gravely, brushing his arm as though comforting him. She's painting herself as the sainted mother and you as the villain. If you're not careful, David, your reputation could be destroyed. Do you really want your children growing up thinking their father was a coward? Her words sank deep, planting seeds of doubt and resentment. David clenched his jaw. I gave her everything, a home, security, and now she wants to make me the enemy? Clara hid her satisfaction behind a mask of sorrow. I hate to tell you these things, but I can't let you be blindsided. You deserve loyalty. You deserve love. David's heart hardened a little more that night. The guilt that once pricked at him dulled under Clara's poisonous lies. Slowly, he began to see Sophia not as the woman he had abandoned, but as a threat to his freedom. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Sophia fought silently against exhaustion and despair. She had no idea that Clara was weaving webs of deceit behind her back. She only knew the man she loved seemed colder every day, his visits shorter, his words sharper. Green noticed it too. That woman is filling his ears with poison, she muttered. Mark my words, Sophia, she's up to no good. Sophia stroked her baby's soft hair, whispering, no matter what lies she spreads, I'll never stop fighting for them. But Clara wasn't done. She had one more scheme in mind, a plan so cruel it could destroy Sophia's reputation forever. The hospital corridors whispered with rumors. Nurses exchanged quiet glances, some pitying Sophia, others confused by the icy attitude David had begun to show. Clara's lies had started to spread like wildfire, tainting the air around Sophia's name. She felt the weight of it every time she caught a nurse looking at her with sympathy tinged by judgment. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in her room feeding her babies, David arrived with Clara trailing behind him like a shadow. His words were clipped, his tone cold. Sophia, I've heard things. People say you've been talking about me, blaming me. Sophia's eyes widened, her voice breaking. David, I never. But Clara cut her off smoothly. David, don't let her manipulate you. She's always playing the victim. She wants everyone to think you're the bad guy. Sophia's chest tightened. Her tears threatened to spill, but she held them back, refusing to give Clara the satisfaction. I almost died bringing these children into the world, she whispered fiercely. The only thing I've said is the truth. You weren't there. The tension in the room thickened until the door swung open. Dr. James entered, his sharp eyes immediately scanning the scene. He could feel the hostility, the false sweetness dripping from Clara's voice. Mr. and Mrs. Harris, he greeted, his tone firm. Then his gaze locked on Clara. And you again. What business do you have in this hospital room? Clara smirked, tilting her head. I'm only here to support David. Someone has to stand by him while his wife spreads lies. Dr. James's eyes hardened. He stepped forward, his presence commanding. Enough. I've been here since the moment Sophia came through those doors. I watched her fight for her life. I shocked her heart back into beating when it stopped, and I watched her hold on to 3 premature infants with nothing but sheer will. If anyone dares say she's lying, they'll answer to me. Sophia blinked, stunned by his sudden defense. David shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his face. Clara, however, bristled, her false charm slipping for the first time. "Doctor," she said sharply, "you don't understand the situation." James cut her off. "I understand plenty. I understand that this woman was abandoned by her husband during the most dangerous night of her life. I understand that she nearly died alone, except for the help of Mrs. Green and my team. And I understand that you, miss, have no right to interfere in her recovery." The room fell silent. Sophia's heart pounded as gratitude and relief flooded her chest. For the first time, someone had spoken the truth aloud, unshaken by Clara's games. Clara forced a laugh, but her eyes flashed with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. David, don't let him twist this." But David said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. Dr. James turned to Sophia, his voice gentler now. "Don't let their words break you. You're stronger than both of them combined." Clara's smile returned, but this time it was darker. Dr. James had just made himself her next target. For a brief moment, Sophia felt relief after Dr. James spoke up for her. His words had cut through the lies, giving her strength to hold her head a little higher. But peace never stayed long. That night, as the hospital grew quiet and the halls dimmed, a sudden alarm shattered the fragile calm. The sharp, urgent beeping came from the neonatal intensive care unit where Sophia's babies lay in their incubators. Nurses rushed past her door, their faces tight with worry. Sophia's heart leapt into her throat. She tried to rise from bed, but her body was still too weak. Mrs. Green hurried in, her face pale. "Sophia, it's the babies. Something's wrong." Sophia's world tilted. She clutched the edge of her bed, her voice breaking. "No. Please, no." Dr. James appeared moments later, his calm but urgent stride filling the room with authority. "2 of the infants are having breathing difficulties. They're too weak to maintain oxygen levels on their own. We're doing everything we can." Sophia's tears spilled uncontrollably. "Please, let me see them. They need their mother." The nurses hesitated, but James nodded. "Bring her in." Carefully. Leaning heavily on Mrs. Green, Sophia shuffled into the NICU, her heart breaking at the sight before her. Her tiny children, so fragile, lay surrounded by tubes and monitors, their little chests rising and falling unevenly. The machines beeped frantically, marking every struggle. Sophia pressed her trembling hand against the glass of the incubator. "My babies, stay with me. Don't leave me. I can't lose you." Her voice cracked, and her tears fell freely, leaving wet streaks on the glass. The sight was almost unbearable. One woman, abandoned by her husband, begging the universe to spare the only treasures she had left. Dr. James adjusted the oxygen settings, barking quick instructions to the nurses. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp and precise, but even he knew that for premature infants, the line between life and death was razor thin. Sophia's sobs filled the room. She whispered prayers through trembling lips, promising anything, everything, if only her children would survive. Mrs. Green stood beside her, stroking her shoulder. "Hold on, child. Don't lose hope. They're fighters, just like you." Meanwhile, across town, David sat at a candlelit dinner with Clara, blissfully unaware of the crisis. He raised his glass, laughing at her shallow jokes, ignoring once again the phone buzzing in his pocket. Back in the NICU, the nurses worked feverishly. One baby's breathing steadied slightly, but the other's monitor continued to scream. Sophia's knees buckled as she pressed harder against the glass, her voice breaking into a desperate cry. "Fight, my love. Please fight. Don't leave me." Dr. James glanced at her, determination blazing in his eyes. "Sophia, talk to them. They need to hear you. Your voice could make the difference." With shaking breath, Sophia leaned close, whispering through her tears. "Mama's here. I'll never leave you. Please, stay with me." And in that fragile silence, the baby's chest suddenly stilled. The monitor's piercing alarm flatlined. The shrill alarm of the flatline sent terror through the NICU. Nurses rushed to the struggling infant, their hands moving swiftly, attaching new tubes, increasing oxygen. Dr. James barked orders, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Start resuscitation. Don't stop until we bring this baby back." Sophia's body trembled as she watched, her knuckles white against the glass. Her legs threatened to give out, but Mrs. Green held her upright. "Stay strong, child," she whispered fiercely. "Your baby needs you to believe." Sophia pressed her forehead against the incubator, her tears soaking the glass. "Please, my sweet one. Don't leave me. I'll protect you. I'll love you every day of your life. Just stay with me." Dr. James worked tirelessly. Seconds stretched like hours until, finally, a weak but steady cry broke through the chaos. Relief crashed over the room. The monitor beeped back to life. Sophia collapsed into Mrs. Green's arms, sobbing with gratitude. Thank you, God." But her relief was short-lived. Across town, David sat in a luxury restaurant with Clara. His phone buzzed again and again, the hospital's number flashing like a warning. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing, but Clara noticed and quickly covered his hand with hers. "Don't answer," she said smoothly. "It's just more drama. Tonight is about us." David hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "But what if something's wrong? The babies." Clara leaned closer, her voice sharp but coated in sweetness. "If you keep letting her pull you back, you'll never be free. Think, David. Do you want to spend your life trapped in that hospital room, surrounded by crying infants and a weak wife? Or do you want this? Freedom, love, success." Her words dripped into his ears like venom. David swallowed hard, torn between conscience and temptation. He pictured Sophia, pale and fragile, holding their children. But then he looked at Clara, dazzling and seductive, promising him a life without burden. Slowly, he slipped his phone back into his pocket. "You're right," he muttered. "Sophia can handle it. She always does." Clara's lips curved into a satisfied smile. She leaned in, whispering, "That's my David." Back at the hospital, Sophia held her babies, her body still shaking from the scare. She looked toward the door, hoping, praying, that David would walk through, that for once he would choose his family. But the doorway remained empty, the silence louder than any rejection. Dr. James watched her, anger burning beneath his calm exterior. "He should be here," he said quietly to Mrs. Green. "A father should never abandon his children." Mrs. Green's eyes hardened. "Mark my words, his choices will destroy him." Sophia kissed her babies' foreheads, her tears falling on their soft skin. She whispered, "Even if your father isn't here, I'll never leave you. You're my everything." And at that very moment, Clara raised her glass to David, toasting their future, unaware that her cruel victory was already planting the seeds of her downfall. For weeks, Clara kept David wrapped tightly in her grasp. She showered him with attention, whispered sweet promises, and painted Sophia as nothing more than a burden. But the cracks in her mask were beginning to show. One evening, Clara sat across from David in her apartment, sipping wine while he scrolled through bills and account statements on his laptop, his brow furrowed. "Clara, do you realize how much money we've been spending? The restaurants, the clothes, the trips. It's draining everything I've saved." Clara's eyes flashed, but she quickly replaced the glare with a sugary smile. "David, darling, why worry about pennies when we're building a life of abundance? You're successful. You'll earn more. Besides, don't you want me to look my best by your side?" David sighed. "It's not pennies. These are serious expenses. And meanwhile, Sophia is raising 3 babies alone. The hospital bills." Clara slammed her glass down, shattering the illusion of calm. "Enough about Sophia. Why must you always bring her up? She's your past. I am your future." Her sudden outburst startled David. For the first time, he saw the sharpness in her eyes, the hunger beneath the charm. "Clara, what exactly do you want from me?" She leaned forward, her voice low, almost menacing. "I want you to cut her off completely. No more visits, no more money, no more guilt. Every time you look back, you weaken us. If you truly love me, prove it. Sever all ties with her and those children." David recoiled. "They're my children." Clara's laugh was cold. "Children you never asked for. Dead weight that will drag you down your entire life. Do you think you can build an empire while paying for 3 mouths you never wanted? Be honest, David. You wanted freedom, and I gave it to you." The room went silent. David stared at her, doubt creeping in. For weeks, Clara's words had guided his every move, but now her intentions rang louder than her seduction. She didn't love him. She loved what he could give her. Back at the hospital, Sophia rocked her babies gently, humming through her exhaustion. She had no idea Clara was working to erase them completely from David's life. Yet, she felt it in her bones. The darkness surrounding Clara was not ordinary jealousy. It was something more dangerous. Mrs. Green noticed Sophia's faraway look. "What troubles you, child?" Sophia shook her head softly. "It's Clara. I don't trust her. She wants to destroy everything I have left." Dr. James, entering with charts in hand, overheard. His jaw tightened. "Then we must be prepared. A woman like her doesn't stop until she gets what she wants." Meanwhile, in Clara's apartment, the tension thickened. David tried to push back. "You're asking too much. They're my blood." Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "Then choose, David. Them or me." And as the silence stretched, David realized the woman he thought he loved wasn't offering him freedom. She was demanding his soul. The days in the hospital blurred into one another, but with each sunrise, Sophia felt a shift deep inside her. At first, she had been consumed by sorrow, waiting for David to return, clinging to the hope that he would choose his family. But after every unanswered call, every empty doorway, she realized the truth. He was gone. One evening, as Sophia sat by her baby's incubators, Mrs. Green placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Child, you've wept long enough. You can't change David's heart, but you can decide how to live. Your little ones need a mother who stands tall." Sophia looked at her children, their tiny chests rising and falling, their fists clenched as if ready to fight. Something stirred within her, something stronger than despair. She wiped her tears and whispered, "You're right. I can't wait for someone who chose to leave. I have to be their strength." Dr. James, who had been quietly monitoring the babies, overheard her words. His eyes softened. "That's the spirit, Sophia. You've survived the worst. Now it's time to build a life where no one can break you again." The next morning, Sophia asked for a mirror. When the nurse brought one, she stared at her reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, but beneath the weariness burned a quiet fire. She combed her hair, washed her face, and whispered to herself, "No more tears. Not for him." With Mrs. Green's encouragement and James's steady support, Sophia began walking the hospital halls again, regaining her strength. Each step was shaky, but each one carried purpose. Nurses who once pitied her began to admire her resilience. She was no longer the fragile woman abandoned on a hospital bed. She was becoming the mother her children needed. Clara, however, wasn't blind to the change. When she visited with David one afternoon, she noticed the difference immediately. Sophia wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't begging. She stood tall by the incubators, her eyes calm but fierce. Clara leaned toward David, whispering, "See? She doesn't even look weak anymore. She's pretending to be strong to trap you in guilt." But Sophia didn't flinch. She turned to Clara and said quietly, yet firmly, "I don't need his pity. And I don't need your lies. My children and I will survive, with or without him." David's eyes flickered with something, doubt, maybe even shame. But Clara gripped his arm tightly, pulling him away. After they left, Mrs. Green smiled proudly. "That's it, Sophia. Don't let them steal your spirit. Stand tall, and you'll see how life changes." Sophia gazed at her babies, her voice steady. "They'll grow up knowing the truth, and I'll make sure they're proud of me." That night, she began writing in a small notebook, plans for her children's future, dreams she once thought impossible. Each word was a step away from despair, a step toward freedom. And as she closed the notebook with determination, Sophia had no idea that her first real chance to fight back would arrive sooner than she expected. Weeks after leaving the hospital, Sophia settled into a modest apartment arranged by Mrs. Green's friend. It wasn't large, and the walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint, but to Sophia it felt like a sanctuary. Her baby's cribs lined the bedroom wall, their soft breaths filling the silence at night. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. She felt a flicker of hope. Still, life was far from easy. Bills piled up on the small kitchen table. Sophia stared at them one morning, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had no income, no husband to provide, and 3 fragile infants who needed more care than she could afford. Mrs. Green, ever watchful, placed a warm cup of tea in her hand. "You faced death and betrayal, child. Money is only another storm to weather. You'll find a way. Sophia smiled faintly, though worry lingered in her eyes. I have to. For them. It was Dr. James who gave her the first push forward. One afternoon, during a checkup for the babies, he noticed her nervous glances at the hospital's billing office. Quietly, he approached her. Sophia, I know you don't want pity, but there are support programs for single mothers. And I also know a foundation looking for someone exactly like you. They need tutors for children in recovery. Sophia's eyes widened. Me? But I haven't worked since. James cut her off gently. You're educated, patient, and strong. Don't underestimate yourself. This could be your chance to step into a new life. With encouragement from James and Mrs. Green, Sophia applied. Within weeks, she was hired. She began working part-time as a tutor for children battling illness. Kids who looked at her not with pity, but with admiration. Her gentle voice, her patience, and the way she spoke of resilience inspired them. And for Sophia, the paycheck, though modest, was a lifeline. Neighbors began to notice her strength too. The woman once seen as a victim was slowly becoming a pillar in her community. Other mothers offered support, local volunteers dropped by with groceries, and even strangers admired her courage. Meanwhile, David's visits grew fewer, his excuses sharper. Clara whispered in his ear that Sophia was moving on without him, twisting the truth to fuel his resentment. But what Clara didn't realize was that Sophia's newfound independence made her more radiant than ever. One evening, Sophia stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her clothes before leaving for work. Her babies cooed softly in the crib. She leaned down, kissing each tiny forehead. One day, you'll see what your mama built from nothing, and you'll know you were always worth it. She straightened, her reflection showing not the broken woman of the hospital, but a mother with fire in her eyes. And just as she locked the door behind her, unaware, a pair of watchful eyes followed her from across the street, someone who had been sent by Clara. David once believed he was invincible. With Clara by his side, he thought he had escaped the chains of family life, stepping into a future of wealth and indulgence. But slowly, almost invisibly, the ground beneath him began to crumble. It started at work. David had been neglecting meetings, distracted by Clara's constant demands for trips, dinners, and gifts. His boss noticed. You've missed 3 deadlines, David, the man said sharply one morning. You're not the man I hired. David stammered excuses, blaming stress, blaming anything but himself. But the truth was undeniable. His performance was slipping, and so was his reputation. At home, the bills piled up. Clara's taste for luxury grew heavier by the day. Designer clothes, jewelry, endless parties. David struggled to keep up. He dipped into savings, then into credit, convincing himself he'd catch up later. But later never came. One evening, after another extravagant dinner, Clara glanced at the credit card receipt and frowned. David, your limit's lower than I thought. Haven't you been paid? David rubbed his temples. I'm behind at work. Things are tight. Clara's smile vanished. Her voice turned cold. Tight? You promised me the world, David. I didn't choose you to live on scraps. Her words cut him deeper than she realized. For the first time, he saw the hunger in her eyes wasn't for him. It was for what he could give. Meanwhile, whispers about his betrayal of Sophia began to spread in the community. Old friends avoided him. Neighbors looked at him with disdain. That's the man who left his wife while she gave birth, they murmured. His name, once spoken with respect, became tainted with disgust. At night, he couldn't sleep. He thought of Sophia, holding their children alone, fighting without him. The guilt gnawed, but Clara's sharp tongue always pulled him back. Don't dwell on her, she'd hiss. She's weak. You're better off without her. But even Clara was changing. The sweetness in her voice soured each time money came up. She grew distant when he mentioned responsibility. The woman who once lured him with promises of freedom now looked at him with thinly veiled contempt. One night, David came home to find Clara on the phone, laughing. When she noticed him, she quickly ended the call. Who was that? He asked suspiciously. Just a friend, she answered too quickly, her eyes avoiding his. For the first time, David felt the sting of betrayal himself. Doubt crept into his chest. Had Clara already found someone else, someone richer, stronger, more useful? His world, once filled with illusions of power, was collapsing. His career faltered, his bank account drained, his reputation stained, and now even Clara, The woman he sacrificed everything for was slipping away. He poured himself a drink, staring into the amber liquid. His reflection in the glass looked hollow, broken. "What have I done?" he whispered. And as if to answer him, Clara stepped into the room, her suitcase half packed, her eyes cold. She was preparing to leave him behind. The day of reckoning finally arrived. The courthouse buzzed with tension as people filled the gallery, eager to witness the scandal that had shaken the community. On one side sat Sophia, her posture steady, her hands resting gently on her lap. Mrs. Hap Green and Dr. James flanked her like silent guardians, their support unshakable. On the other side, David sat stiffly in a tailored suit that no longer masked his weariness. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights, his shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Beside him, Clara radiated false confidence, dressed impeccably, her lips curved in a smug smile. But even her polished veneer couldn't hide the unease flickering in her eyes. The judge entered, commanding silence. "This case will determine custody of the children and financial responsibility. We will hear testimony from both sides." Sophia rose first. Her voice trembled at the start, but grew steadier with each word. "Your Honor, I nearly lost my life bringing my children into this world. I begged my husband to be there, but he chose another woman instead. He left me alone on the most dangerous night of my life." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Sophia's eyes glistened, but she did not break. "I don't stand here as a victim. I stand as a mother who will fight for her children, no matter how alone I've been. They are my strength, and I will give them the future they deserve." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Harris." "Mr. Harris, your response?" David shifted uncomfortably. His lawyer whispered in his ear, urging him to remain calm. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my wife exaggerates. I support her, but I cannot be everywhere at once." "Lies!" Mrs. Green's voice burst out before she could stop herself. The judge rapped the gavel. "Order." Dr. James stepped forward as a witness. His voice was steady, precise. "Your Honor, I was there. Sophia's heart stopped. I revived her. Her husband never showed. He abandoned her and the children. That is not exaggeration. That is fact." The room buzzed again, whispers filling every corner. David's face flushed crimson. Clara gripped his arm tightly, whispering furiously in his ear. Finally, the judge turned to Clara. "Miss, you have been mentioned repeatedly. Do you have anything to say?" Clara rose gracefully, her voice honeyed. "Your Honor, Sophia is twisting the truth. David was with me because she drove him away with her weakness. She has always been manipulative, always." "Enough!" Sophia's voice rang out, stronger than ever before. The entire courtroom turned to her. She stood tall, her eyes blazing. "You can call me weak, but I survived what should have killed me. I raised 3 children when you were too busy stealing my husband. You may lie to the world, Clara, but you cannot erase the truth." The gallery erupted in murmurs of agreement, some even applauding before the gavel slammed again. And as Clara's mask slipped, the judge's next words carried the weight of fate. "This court will now hear evidence of financial misconduct." The courtroom buzzed as financial records were laid out for all to see. Documents showed how David had drained his savings, maxed out credit cards, and funneled money into Clara's endless luxuries, trips, jewelry, designer clothes. The evidence was undeniable. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Harris, do you deny these expenses?" David shifted in his seat, sweat forming at his brow. I was under pressure. I only wanted to keep Clara happy." The gallery erupted in whispers. The words sounded pitiful, like a confession of weakness rather than defense. Clara, sensing the tide turning, stiffened beside him. She leaned close, her voice sharp but quiet enough for only him to hear. "Don't drag me into this." David turned to her desperately. "But you spent it all. You said you needed these things, that it was for us." Clara pulled her arm away, her eyes cold. "No, David, you made those choices. Don't blame me." The shock on his face was almost painful to watch. For months, he had believed her sweet promises, surrendered his life to her, and now, when it mattered most, she was cutting herself free. Sophia sat across the room, watching silently. There was no joy in her expression, only quiet sorrow. She had once loved this man, but the figure before her was unrecognizable. Weak, humiliated, abandoned. The judge called Clara to the stand. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached, her face the picture of elegance. But her testimony was a dagger. I never asked David to spend beyond his means, she said smoothly. He pursued me. He spoiled me because he wanted to. I never forced him. If he ruined his finances, that was his choice. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. David's mouth opened in shock. Clara, how can you say that, after everything I gave you, everything I sacrificed? Clara turned her head slightly, her lips curling in a faint smile. You should have thought of that before betraying your family. Her words hit him harder than any slap. The courtroom murmured with disgust. Even those who had once pitied David now looked at him with contempt. The judge banged the gavel. Order. But the damage was done. David sat frozen, abandoned by the very woman he had destroyed his marriage for. Clara stepped down from the stand, her chin lifted proudly, as though she had already won. When she returned to her seat, she whispered without a trace of warmth, "We're done, David. I don't stay with failures." He stared at her, his face pale, his eyes hollow. "You're leaving me? After everything?" Clara crossed her legs, her smile cold. "I never promised forever. Only fools believe in that." The courtroom buzzed louder than ever. Sophia closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude, not for Clara's cruelty, but for the justice slowly unfolding. And as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling, David realized the cruelest truth of all. He had lost not only his wife and children, but also the woman he betrayed them for. The gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom like thunder. The judge's voice carried finality. Custody is awarded solely to Mrs. Sophia Harris. Mr. Harris is ordered to provide financial support. This court recognizes the mother's sacrifice, resilience, and devotion. Applause erupted from the gallery, though quickly hushed by the gavel. Sophia sat still, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. This wasn't victory born of vengeance, it was justice, long overdue. Beside her, Mrs. Green squeezed her hand, whispering, "It's over, child. You've won." David sat slumped, his face ashen. Clara was nowhere to be seen. She had slipped out the back the moment the ruling turned against him. He was alone now, stripped of everything, his reputation, his wealth, and the two women he thought he controlled. As Sophia left the courthouse, flashes of cameras greeted her. Neighbors, once pitying, now looked at her with admiration. She shielded her babies from the noise, whispering softly, "We're going home." Years passed, and Sophia rebuilt her life with quiet determination. She worked tirelessly, balancing jobs and studies, pouring every ounce of love into raising her 3 children. Nights were long, money was tight, but she never wavered. Her children grew, each one carrying a piece of her strength. Ethan, the eldest, became a lawyer, his sharp mind dedicated to defending those abandoned and betrayed, just as his mother once had been. At his graduation, he held Sophia's hand high and said, "I fight for justice because my mother taught me never to stay silent." Grace, the second, became a doctor specializing in obstetrics, the very field where her mother's life had hung by a thread. Her patients adored her warmth and devotion. "Every baby deserves a safe beginning," she often said, "and every mother deserves someone who won't walk away." Michael, the youngest, became a successful entrepreneur. But unlike his father, he built his empire on integrity, donating generously to single mothers and children's charities. "Because of my mother, I know where true strength lies," he told reporters. Through it all, Sophia remained their anchor. She watched her children rise, her heart swelling with pride, knowing every tear, every sacrifice had led to this. She was no longer the abandoned wife in a hospital bed. She was the matriarch of a legacy built on resilience and love. One afternoon, at a public event honoring community heroes, Sophia stood beside her grown children as they spoke of her sacrifices. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, many with tears in their eyes, and in the back of that crowd stood David, older, smaller, broken. His eyes filled with regret as he watched the family he had thrown away. No one applauded him. No one remembered him with pride. He was just a shadow of what he could have been. Sophia, however, stood tall. She didn't look his way. Her gaze was fixed on her children, the proof of her triumph. And as the applause thundered, Sophia finally felt it in her bones. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had built her into the woman her children would honor forever. So, my friend, the story has now come to a close. If you're still here, it means something in Sophia's journey has touched your heart. Maybe it's her courage. Maybe it's the way love and sacrifice can overcome betrayal. Life often gives us pain we don't deserve. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Sophia chose strength, and so can we. Her story reminds us that betrayal doesn't define us. Our response does. Healing begins when we stop clinging to what hurt us and start building what will protect us. Like Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul. Together, let's keep spreading strength and healing.